Good afternoon, everyone. Carosoft Technology would like to welcome you to our Security Compass webinar. Carosoft Technology is a trusted government, education, and healthcare IT solutions aggregator, delivering software and support solutions to federal, state, and local government agencies and enterprise healthcare organizations. Carosoft maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all its vendors, including Security Compass. Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, so please don't hesitate to call or email us for any of your needs. Today, we are lucky enough to have Jay Ryan, U.S. Federal Government Program Manager from Security Compass, joining us today. I'll now hand the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you, Alex. And appreciate everyone for being here. And thank you again to our Carosoft team for organizing this and getting this all together. One moment here while I share my screen. To make this a bit of a collaborative effort, if you have questions, please do drop those in the Q&A. We'll try to answer those kind of in line. And if we have the ability to have a pause and have a kind of back and forth conversation, also open that as well to make this a little bit more interactive as we go through our research findings. So again, thank you for coming today. My name is Jay Ryan. I'm the U.S. Federal Program Manager, and we're going to discuss a research project we do pretty much on a semi-annual basis. We compared a large market set between 2021 and 2023 this year, which we're happy to show you today. But really, we go out and we pull the federal market space, both DoD and Fed civilian, in regard to a number of questions around how they're conducting secure software development and how they're pushing production and ultimately achieving ATO in those ATO processes. So we're going to dive into a subset of what that report looks like. The full detailed report, to include interactive breakdown, is available on our website. I'll be sharing links and showing you where you can access that data as well. All right, so driving on. A little bit about us, Security Compass. If you don't know us, we are the makers of SD Elements. It's a tool set used to develop developer-centric approach to threat modeling and control management by the federal government entities, primarily used for compliance purposes in mapping out your control set and ensuring that you're building secure, compliant, and code at scale. To help ease into the ATO process and organize your ATO packages for your application security needs. We also make a strong application security training solution, which a number of folks use to include the embedded training that's built into SD Elements for just-in-time training. So enough of my sales pitch. That's a little bit about us, but we'll move on. All right, so who am I? U.S. Federal Program Manager. My background is primarily been in U.S. Fed, working at some of the intelligence community agencies in cyber and information operations, a number of program management roles, and some acquisition experience. And in the last roughly 5 to 7 years, working on commercial and defense security product management. So happy to be here with you guys and talking about what we're doing for ATO. All right, so this was a comprehensive study over a period of a couple of months. We went out, used a third party to elicit responses from those folks who were actively involved in the development of secure software. So going out and finding the personas of both leadership and the devs that are working at the lower levels to make the things happen. So we had 144 respondents from U.S. Federal, 144 respondents in total that made it all the way through the survey process. 74% of those were federal, 18% state, and a smaller percentage local. If you're joining us from a local agency, I'd love to hear some of your feedback today on maybe what you guys are doing and how it applies. We've seen a large uptick in local agencies starting to build their own software and start to do some DevSecOps type work. So some interesting things happening out there. Again, the seniority level was across the board. We did have some very high CTOs, CIOs opine on their opinions and feedback for the report, which was great. And we had a great number of folks who were in the trenches day to day, getting after it, working the SDLC to dev software out, and their feedback was tremendous. So again, you guys have the opportunity to dig into that at the website. We'll share all that towards the end as well. Okay, so authority to operate, ATO is what we're talking about today. Some folks have moved on to continuous authority to operate, which is tremendous. Really what we're talking about is a breakdown of the NIST risk management framework, that special publication 837. And its associated family controls, NIST 853, which, if you're like me, we're all overly versed in and eat, sleep, and breathe 853 and all the control systems and control families. The DoD has taken it many steps further across the last several years, starting in 2020, 2019-ish, really revolutionizing, pushing forward on the software factory concept to make acquisitions and development move along much quicker. push into, the last 2 years with Platform One, Kessel Run, a number of the leading software factories really getting to the elite level of production from a software standpoint and pushing into that continuous authority to operate realm, where it's not just a continuous authority to ship already approved items, it's the ability to fast track the development process from concept to creation to actual deployment through that CATO process built on top of very defined software development pipelines. So that's really what we're talking about today. If there are any questions about what an ATO is, what ATO is, feel free to drop that in the Q&A, and I'll make sure we dive into maybe any misunderstandings if you're coming to this fresh. So some of the things that we found is really we're going to break into the results. Security by design is a leading effort going into FY24. I think we all know that if you read the last update in April from CISA, where security by design and the framework of that around the executive order were really put into practice. That's our new reality. That's where we are. Previously, leading into these last probably year to 18 months, we've always referred to this as shifting left, moving security all the way to the very beginning of your development lifecycle process. So we asked right off the bat, is this a priority for you for the year? Shifting security left and security by design. In 2021, you can see the breakout there, pretty fragmented. It was a top priority for some of the leading providers, but it was kind of, broken to maybe a top 10 sub item. This last year, 2023, over 90% are reporting that it is a major priority, either the top priority at 40% or top 3 priority that they're really contending with and how to put into action. So it's great to see that the industry is really taking hold of this wholeheartedly and are moving forward, even though we asked this question primarily before the major AI craze dropped. I imagine there might be some alternate responses, but we do have a couple of AI questions in there, which let us know that it's something they were thinking about before even answering this question. So hopefully still a leading 90% top focus. So if security is at the forefront and ATO is of a primary objective, of course, we're all pushing forward for the continuous authority to operate. Are we actively tracking the speed to deploy? Do we know how fast we're going? Do we know if our original ATO process was burdensome, cumbersome, and an issue? And if CATO is going to fix that, you have to be able to measure and monitor what you're doing. So we asked, and the answer was yes. Overall, the majority of software factories, software development shops are using a focused metrics-based, tools-based approach to measure the speed with which they're putting out software. And the big thing that we saw coming into the year, which we're very pleased about, was that number it doubled, right? So we went from a 49% roughly in 2021 to 65% of a focus on actively tracking this into the new year. So a number of folks have always tracked it indirectly. You can see lagging indicators across the board when you start looking at how many apps you pushed out to production, lagging indicators when it comes to your uptime, runtime of your production environment, things of that nature. But those are indirect type measurements. So we're pleased to see that. The other piece too is the reduction in the number of folks who said no. So that's always a very positive, even though it's kind of a glaring, well, no duh, if we had a 90% increase on the previous one. So very happy to see these numbers trending in the right direction. Wrong direction. So the challenge then that's presented, if everyone is focused on speed and moving forward, as that speed increases, are we still ensuring that we're meeting coding best practices in line with this ATO process? And so the ATO gate is always going to be with your assessor. There's always going to be the deep dive with your ISM and your ISO to understand, have you checked all the right boxes? Have you actually built the code secure from the start? And is the risk low enough to be pushed to production? So how are they doing that? Well, we've got a mixed bag of results. Secure code reviews have always been a lot of the gold standard. We did see a major uptick in the use of automated security testing, so your SAST and your DAST tools, which is fantastic. A major component of your pipeline, which absolutely should be there. And we saw a pickup in the regular training efforts associated with the devs. So no longer is it just annual security that they're doing testing and training for. But they've built that into a regular day process or more stringent process to really upskill a lot of their labor workforce for the devs on the security practices. So great things. But what we really saw, though, for tracking this and moving this along is a large percentage, 38%, are still using spreadsheets. I'll pause there because that is worrisome. Even more worrisome with some of the tangential feedback of spreadsheets and email. So actually emailing those spreadsheets back and forth, kind of lack of version control, other kind of issues that come into play when that is your productivity workflow. So something to think about as a community is if we're still using spreadsheets. There are better ways, and we should be really looking to those to improve the speed and the security of how we're doing coding best practices. So we're going faster in our coding process, but are we going faster safely? Are we keeping requisite speed with the way that we are identifying these standards and the controls we have to align with to meet those secure coding requirements? So overall, as an industry, we are getting much better. A number of respondents reported 1 to 2 weeks to really fully scope out the controls for their environment. And the elite software factories, 1 day or less. A lot of times it's taking them an hour to an hour and a half to sit down as a team and walk through a process to identify the controls that they're getting from their pipeline that they're inheriting, the controls that are being pushed upon them based upon impact levels and other issues associated with Fed development. And they're able to knock that out pretty quickly now. So that's a very good thing to see. So you can see in comparison to 2021 in blue, in 2023, we've got some pretty strong reductions in time and increase in that 1 to 7-ish type day window, which is great to see. So while we're getting faster, some of the things that are holding us back is the continued use of manual processes. So I'm going to kick the horse again a little bit here. And one of the leading issues was manually using spreadsheets as one of the process control and workflow type I guess respondents were saying was kind of being used predominantly inside of the organizations. We did see a measured increase inside of toolset use, which is great. So productivity tool sets, your Jira workflow, your GitLab workflow, tools like ourselves or other GRC tools for doing this. So that is increasing, and that's great to see. We need to see a lot more of that. I think with the secure by design push and the push for automation, we're going to see these numbers incredibly jump across this next year. So definitely looking forward to seeing that happen in 2024. And hopefully when we do our survey again, the responses will be markedly different for a positive increase here. All right, so overall, are agencies satisfied with their approach and time to ATO? Was the big thing we wanted to take away. So we asked, how are you really doing ATO on a large scale? And the standard ATO process, the risk management framework, is still the predominant kind of approach. The paper-based drill, that approach is taking you anywhere from 60 days at a fast pace to even a year. We've had agencies report to us that it takes them up to 18 months sometimes in doing the traditional approach to ATO to get that through the door. Continuous ATO or continuous authority to field is something that is gaining much more speed with the DoD memo, back in February, and a lot of the software factors retooling some of the ways that they approach the ATO process. Speed has become less of an issue, less of an inhibitor to pushing software production. So we're getting a lot more great software out to the field, to those folks that need it the most on the front end, and we're doing it much more securely. And then a small subsegment are still reporting that they don't really know how they're doing the ATO process, or that the ATO process isn't really formalized against RMF in a lot of ways. So these are a lot of the smaller state and local agencies who maybe have boutique type control implementations, control workflows, and authorization workflows that maybe don't match the rigor at the federal level, which is fine. But it's an opportunity because a lot of those apps that get developed at that level have massive impact at a local scale and have a lot of open vulnerabilities for things that might be critical infrastructure or voting or other things at the local level, where they could highly benefit from the larger approach that RMF brings to the table. So we do want to make sure that if you hear from a local group or state group and you're interested in learning more, or maybe you fall into that 6% group, I would love to speak to you more about how other folks are doing it and share best practices to kind of ensure we're all sharing the love on how we're seeing success. The time to achieve authority to operate. Next one. So a lot of folks now, you can see 76% in that 2 to 3 month range, roughly. So we had a lot of respondents really falling into that 2-month range, which was great. 60 days sounds like a long time when you're trying to get production ready software out the door, and it can be, especially for critical, fixes or critical use type based software. But from your day-to-day standpoint, regular, secure, large scale apps being launched inside of 60 days is still pretty good. But again, we have a number of respondents who are doing it less than a month, and again, a number of elite people who are putting software out the door way faster inside of a week or less, which is great. And then overall satisfaction is up across the board. And this owes a lot to the use of automated-based systems, tool-based systems that are really accelerating the pace to identification of security controls, the planning phase of the SDLC, your threat modeling approach, training approach, your ability to leverage a pipeline that's larger than ATOs, you're getting inherited controls. All of these things are really benefiting that larger people process technology approach to pushing software out the door. So satisfaction, primarily extremely satisfied. We saw a big jump between the 16% to 38%. And then that big gap where previously in 2021, we had satisfied, very satisfied, or partly satisfied, coalesced into a larger block of very satisfied. So we're making progress. We're making a dent in what's happening out there in the world. I'm happy to see those numbers coming up. So kind of hinted at it or spoke to it before, but platforms are really playing a big role in getting you 60-70% of the way there. Your pipeline is bringing you 60-70% of your controls. You're knocking those out, and those could be inherited by your apps. So now you really have to focus on that core 30%. That's getting you there. That's an easier mountain to climb, hurdle to jump. Lack of other metaphors. That's where a lot of folks are seeing the ability to go faster and hit scale. But there's still a number of other challenges for implementing DevSecOps, for implementing the process to get you to that ATO. And what we're seeing here is organizations are kind of overcoming the budget. Budget was a major constraint. That's kind of dropping a little bit. The legal and regulatory and compliance controls are up. And so as platforms are maturing, we're starting to see the compliance piece catch up. On the back end of that approach, the software factories who are growing hard and fast and kind of working with a little bit of a broader rule set for the assessor, they're tightening up in a lot of ways. But conversely, the data they have to put forward necessarily for proof is kind of relaxing. So it's a bit of a interesting time inside of Fed in regard to the documentation and the workflow for CATO. The big hurdle, though, is inadequate skill sets, either that being lack of training or lack of knowledge around the ability to conduct some of the things like platform. A number of customers cited the servicing of their platforms, which they rely on for their pipeline, as being a major hurdle and a major time issue with them. So getting Kubernetes stacks up and running, having enough engineers on the workflow there to be able to spin up what they need to do their day-to-day dev is being kind of an impingement from that standpoint. The challenges with ATO process and speed. This one, people reported, having more challenges this year in 2023, but this is something in the next year we're going to get a little bit more granular with to understand what those challenges really divested into, because overall we saw, as you saw me brief in the previous slides, much more happiness and satisfaction with their ATO process. So to see kind of a contradictory position here has been interesting for us and something that we want to pull back the peel on to see a little bit more of. And then again, as these organizations become a little bit more official, we're seeing a bit more of a lack of organizational agility come into play. So as the infrastructure grows, as the personnel and overhead grow, now there's a little bit more checks and balances. Organizational wise, maybe they can't move as fast because there's a little bit more people in the chain to say yes, a little bit more people in the chain that need to sign off prior to pushing something for an ATO or to getting operationally items stood up to go a little bit faster. So that's also been a bit of a pain point that people are reporting this year. And then, of course, securing the DevSecOps infrastructure and pipeline itself. It was kind of a wash between our 2 years now, but we are seeing a lot of folks, it's much faster. So if you're a government entity and doing it in-house, sometimes we've seen where that's a little bit more of a challenge.
All right, is CATO the primary means that agencies are pushing apps to production?
Well, I think I would venture to say no. I think it's the end state that a good number of the agencies want to get to. We just saw the VA talking last week at Perdacity with Rise 8, right, about their success in being able to get the VA, the first CATO designation inside of the Fed Civ government, which was awesome to see. Major congrats to the team that did that. It was a lot of hard work. So I know it's the end result that a lot of folks are striving for, but I do know a number of agencies are very much stuck on that rigorous approach to ATO inside of RMF that's very manual. They got to really move the reports along. They've not fully created a process that gets them to that mark of a CTO yet.
Okay, I have another one that came in. Where is the comparative data pulled to analyze the company's specific threats and their impact?
Analyzes the company specific threats and their impact. That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that, Jack. The data that we typically see is, what gets brought in for CVs, things of that nature. You can roll that into your ATO process. The assessors really mitigate through that based upon the architecture and what they're really building on top of to understand what's applicable, not applicable. And then from there, that breaks down into kind of a risk posture based upon, the number of controls that are left open, the number of CVEs and vulnerabilities that are left open from that process. So it's really kind of a sliding scale based upon the reality of what they're building toward and building upon in their approach. The impact of that, though, is varied. Sometimes you can have a major risk where, your assessor is going to come back and say, you've got everything based upon what you've selected and what's out there in the world that you're building on, software wise, language wise, platform wise. Other times, the assessor is comfortable with taking some of that risk and they POAM a large number of items, kind of park those things for later down the road and accept that. It's kind of a hard question to answer, but a lot of this gets washed out in the process and approach on the SDLC when they move into DAS testing. Mitigate and close out a lot of the threats and vulnerabilities and give themselves a better risk posture. I hope that maybe answered that correctly, but happy to see any kind of feedback on that. That's all I had. Thank you all for jumping on. We'll hang here for another few minutes if there's any other questions.
I would like to thank all of our participants for joining, as well as Jay for presenting and answering our questions. We hope today's presentation has been helpful for you and your organization. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, feel free to contact the Security Compass team at Carahsoft. Our contact information is displayed, so please don't hesitate to call or email us. Thank you again and have a great day.